Part of the purpose of the miracles in Mark is that Jesus is going around really helping people. The purpose of the miracles in John does not seem to primarily be Jesus is a servant of everyone. He's not going around saying, oh, what can I do to help everyone who is poor? I mean, there's a little bit of that, but it's not nearly to the same level as it is in Mark and Matthew. In John, the primary reason why Jesus is going around doing miracles is not to help people, but there's signs that prove that he is who he says he is. If you look, the narrator specifically draws attention to it. Jesus did this, the first of his signs, and revealed his glory. Right? In Mark, Jesus is concerned with helping others. In John, the signs seem solely wrapped up in proving his credentials. So the priority of, is he proving his credentials or is he helping people? He seems to be helping people more in Mark. He seems to be definitely proving his credentials in John. That's the primary thing here. What else? Anthony?
He doesn't stop talking about himself. While on the other ones, he doesn't really talk about himself.
Yeah. Talks about himself, and he specifically makes these I am this, I am that statements. I think that he says Jesus refers to himself using the phrase I am only 2 times in both Mark and Luke. Only 5 times in Matthew. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says I am 46 times. This I am stuff is way, way more important about the Gospel of John.
It says that neither of the stories request a sign or the account of temptation.
What's that?
It says neither of the stories request for a sign or the account of temptation.
In both, in all 3, I think it's in all 3 of the synoptics, after Jesus is baptized, this is how it happens in Mark. Jesus is baptized, he goes out and he's tempted by whom? He's tempted by the devil out in the wilderness. That story doesn't end up in here. The other thing that he's talking about, request for a sign. In Mark, I think it's the Pharisees come up to Jesus in Mark and say, prove who you are, give us a sign. And what does Jesus tell them? He basically says, I don't have to prove anything to you. He refuses to offer them a sign. Does Jesus refuse to offer people signs in the Gospel of John?
No.
No, that seems to be one of his main purposes here. I've got signs to show. So that request, I should add this, and the refusal, that story where Jesus is requested to give a sign and he refuses, that's not in that's not in John. It wouldn't be in John, because if it were in John, if somebody asked him to give a sign, he'd probably be like, sure, what do you want me to do? Anything else that Irma points out here, these emphases?
I don't know if there's another one. Did you try?
Do you have something?
It might be something. I don't know.
Okay.
It says, John. It says that in the 4th Gospel, Jesus has come down for the Father, and is soon returned to him, and his message alone is can bring eternal life. Himself is equal to God.
Yeah, in the Gospel of John, Jesus is sent by God, and it says that he will return to God. But do we see that motif in the synoptics? No. Also, the language of eternal life is largely unique to the Gospel of John. Jesus doesn't go around in the Gospel of Mark offering you eternal life. In the Gospel of Mark, he says, if you don't help the poor, you're going to be screwed when the apocalypse comes. In the Gospel of John, do you guys see any apocalypticism? Mark, you get the apocalypticism. John, there's no apocalypticism. Instead of saying the end is near, Jesus says eternal life is near. All you have to do is believe in me. I'm going to say more about that in a minute.
I think there was one more.
You had something else?
But it says that John's unique understanding of Jesus' miracles is matched by the distinctive portrayal of Jesus' teaching, but in the synoptic it says you will have noticed that Jesus scarcely ever speaks about himself.
Yeah, that's more like, Jesus doesn't really talk about himself in the synoptics, but he does in the Gospel of John.